For more on the fire in a Toronto Maple Leaf head coach Sheldon Keefe, let's bring in Mark Masters. Mark, over his 5 seasons with the Toronto Maple Leafs, you've seen pretty much every single game he's coached. You've been there in the dressing room to talk to the players before and after the games and after practices. I want to get your perspective on how this all unfolded for Sheldon Keefe. From your perspective as somebody watching from the outside, was this Keefe unable to get the best out of the talent he had, or was this Keefe dealing with a disproportionate amount of offensive talent, but just not enough defensive talent, so it really was out of his hands?
Well, I mean, you get 5 chances at the playoffs and just the one series win. It's hard to say he did not get the opportunity. There certainly were personnel issues, of course. And for whatever reason, he wasn't able to translate the offensive success they had in the regular season and the success in general that they had in the regular season. Amazing success in the regular season that sometimes gets overlooked. For whatever reason, that did not translate, for the most part, into the playoffs. Of course, he did guide the Leafs to their first playoff series win in 19 seasons last year against a very good opponent in the Tampa Bay Lightning. And that is an achievement. But yes, just in general, as he acknowledged in his news conference on Monday, it's a results business, and the Leafs did not live up to expectations during this era in the playoffs. And you could sense it in his voice Monday that he knew this was coming.
Mark, throughout the year, when players underperform, it's up to the coach to somehow figure out a way to motivate them. We've seen Sheldon Keefe at different times publicly challenge his players, and then a couple of days later almost apologize, saying, you guys misunderstood what I did. How much of what Keefe was unable to do was because he was unable to really challenge these superstar players who are amongst the highest paid players in the entire NHL?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think he's evolved a bit as coaches of the Leafs. Of course, less walking back stuff this last season in particular, the first under Brad Treliving. And there was a time during this last regular season where he benched his top power play unit after they gave up a 2-0 in a game against the Winnipeg Jets. So, there was other examples of that throughout the season. But my sense this year was a guy, developing in that respect. I think you look at a lot of these individual great players on the Leafs, and they deserve the credit for their success, but they still developed under Sheldon Keefe. William Nylander in particular is a guy who played for him with the Toronto Marlies and has really blossomed into their most reliable playoff performer. And a lot of the credit goes to William Nylander for that, but Sheldon Keefe as well for turning him into that, helping him along the way. And actually at the locker cleanout day last year, not this year, but last year, Keefe had pointed to Nylander as one of the players he was most proud of and his role and his success. Austin Matthews has emerged into a guy who can score 69 goals and be nominated as a Selke Trophy finalist. Mitch Marner, a Selke Trophy finalist who almost got 100 points. These guys have developed very nicely in the regular season under his watch. And so Sheldon Keefe can point to that. Again, it's the thing that no one's been able to solve in Toronto. That offense goes away, and the top-end guys haven't been able to come through at the same level in the playoffs, anywhere close, really. So it all comes down to the playoffs for Sheldon Keefe and why things did not work out here. I mean, he's been a tremendous regular season coach for this team. 8 straight years in the playoffs, tied for the longest streak with Boston. He's responsible for 5 of those seasons. So, it's hard to really pinpoint exactly where things went wrong for Sheldon Keefe in the playoffs, because in the regular season, he's been able to overcome a lot.
But Mark, that's the key though, right? You could be a good coach if you can win during the regular season, but to be a great coach, you've got to be able to win in the playoffs. You mentioned the offense. Number 2 offense in the entire NHL. 69 goals by Austin Matthews during the regular season. But then the offense just completely disappeared in the playoffs. A power play that just went 1 for 21. A good coach has to become a great coach by the way they adjust to what their opposition is presenting them with. It just seemed time after time after time, every time Sheldon Keefe took this group into the postseason, other coaches adjusted and said, we know what you guys try to do. We're going to stop you from doing that. And they've been very effective in stopping the Leafs. But Sheldon Keefe and the Leafs have not been effective at all in terms of adjusting and being able to provide that same type of offensive explosion in the playoffs. So does that not tell us that Sheldon Keefe was just in over his head with this group?
I'm not sure in over his head, but certainly unable to solve it, right? I mean, the most damning comment after Game 7 in Boston was when he said teams set up the game so the Leafs beat themselves. Well, how are you unable to counter that, right? Why does that keep happening? Why does a performance like Game 4 happen in Toronto? Why does a performance like Game 3 in Florida happen where the team seems paralyzed, especially the star guys, and unable to do something? Why aren't you able to make changes or say something that allows them to overcome that? Those are the performances that I think in the end cost Sheldon Keefe. 5-12 on home ice with last change, with the home ice advantage in the playoffs in his career, where that should be an area where the coach is able to influence things, get the matchups, and find a way. But they were not a very good home ice team in the playoffs under his watch. So that's another area I know, talking to Pierre LeBrun, who I did a hit with right after Game 4 in Toronto this year. He said when he talks to people around the league, that's that comes up when it comes to Sheldon Keefe, is that performance at home in the playoffs is really unacceptable. So yes, I would agree. I don't know if he was in over his head, because I think he's a really good coach, and I think he's going to have success moving forward. And I'll be curious to see in his next stop some of the lessons he learned here are applied, and maybe with different personality and a different mix, he can have success in the playoffs. But yes, the areas you pointed to, you can't ignore. I mean, they were a great offensive team in the regular season, could not get it done in the playoffs. I will say that sometimes you look at coaching and say that you should be able to coach defense, right? And he did. There's no doubt that he got the team to buy in defensively, and they played hard for him right to the bitter end of the Boston series, coming off that terrible performance in Game 4. So there's a lot of good here with Sheldon Keefe. I know he's been fired. It's going to look like a missed opportunity in Toronto. He was put in a position where it was his first NHL job, and he was thrown in a very tough market with a team that was expected to succeed. So there's a lot of issues there. But yeah, I mean, you can't ignore the pitfalls for sure, Gino.
All right, Mark. So then where does this team need to go from here? You know the players in that room. You've seen what's worked and what hasn't worked. We saw a player-friendly coach in Sheldon Keefe, unsuccessful. We saw a Mike Babcock type of coach, which seemed to be at the complete other end of the scale, which was unsuccessful. What kind of coach does this group need in order to help elevate it to the next level?
Well, I mean, I mentioned it, Sheldon Keefe, that was his first job in the NHL. He had won a Calder Cup in Toronto, but there's nothing like the NHL. And certainly, I don't know, if you're looking for a team that doesn't have pedigree in the playoffs and doesn't have a track record of playoff success, it'd be nice to bring in a coach who does and can help them get over that hump. That, to me, would make the most sense. We'll see. Certainly based on the statement released by Brad Treliving today, a new voice just in general might be a good thing, right? It's felt like it's gotten a bit stale here. It feels like Groundhog Day. It feels like the same things keep coming up. So I think just in general, a new voice, you got to pick the right new voice, of course, but somebody new could be a positive just on its own.
Speaking of voices, we're going to hear from the guys at the top of the Toronto Maple Leaf organization, Keith Pelly, Brendan Shanahan, and Brad Treliving in Friday's availability. So it'll be interesting to see where they want to take this organization next. Mark Masters has joined us from Toronto. We thank you.
And Gino, one last point from me on Sheldon Keefe, yes, before I let you go, or before you let me go. I just want to say that I thought he handled everything in Toronto really well. The media, he always had a lot of time for us, and it always felt like he was trying to give us lengthy answers and really explain where he was coming from. And you don't always get that. And I really appreciated that. So obviously he fell short in a lot of ways, but I really appreciated the way he handled the media and tried to convey his message, understanding that through us, he could get it to the fan base of exactly what he was trying to do. He didn't always have the answers, but he did try his best, it felt like, and gave us a lot of time. So I appreciated that.
Well said, Mark. Thank you for that.